Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Ryan, and I'm a guide for the Central Park Conservancy. We're the nonprofit organization that takes care of Central Park year-round, helping to keep it clean and green. We understand that right now it's not the easiest time for everybody to make it to the park, so we want to continue to make it easier for you to join us by taking these virtual discovery walks each week. These weekly walks each week. Every Wednesday, we encourage you to join us at 12:30 for an exploration of a different area of Central Park. Today, we're going to be exploring a very beautiful and very historic area of Central Park, the Harlem Meer. We're going to be together for about 15 minutes or so. Just about all the pictures you're going to see, besides a few, were taken by myself within the past week. Before we do begin our walk, let's just do a little bit of housekeeping. We're using Zoom, and if you've joined us before, you may be familiar with some of the controls. But if you'd like to say hello or let us know where you're joining us from, we encourage you to use the chat feature. If you do have a question that you want answered, you can use the Q&A feature, and my colleagues Jose and Juan are going to be on the back end answering questions as we go. The last thing you're going to see pop up on your screen are going to be a few polls that I'm going to introduce throughout the walk today. Once you answer the poll, it'll disappear. And once everybody has voted, I'll share the results and we can see everybody's consensus. All right, so let's jump right into our exploration of the Harlem Meer, located in the north end of Central Park. Here's a little map of the route that we're going to be taking today, starting right in between 5th Avenue and 6th Avenue, right around 110th Street on the northeast corner of Central Park. We're going to be exploring a favorite landscape of mine and one that, no matter the weather, offers beautiful views. So let's jump right into our walk. We're going to be starting again in between 5th and 6th Avenue, actually right in between two gates to Central Park. If you joined us in the past, you've learned that every entrance to Central Park has a gate named after different prominent citizens of New York or people that might be using that gate. Just to the left of this photo along 5th Avenue is Pioneers Gate. Just to the right of this photo, more towards the west, is Farmers Gate. Both of these gates actually play a great relation into the Harlem Meer, and we'll learn why in just a few moments. But let's start entering the park. Right as we start to enter the park, we're going to run into one of 5 visitor centers located in Central Park, this one being the Charles A. Dana Discovery Center. This is actually the only building in Central Park created to purposefully be a visitor center. So if you enter the park from the northern end, you should have no trouble finding it. And when this building is open, you can get free maps to help you explore the park. This building was constructed in 1993, and it serves in a very kind of Gothic Victorian style, very reminiscent of the creator Calvert Vaux's main kind of interest in buildings. Buildings are meant to flow with the park, and this one certainly does, sitting just on the northern corner of the Harlem Meer. This building, unfortunately, is not open right now because of the current situation, but when it is open, it does offer a small exhibit room inside that'll teach you about the surrounding landscape, as well as offer free materials that you can rent for free. You can rent Discovery backpacks for younger children, binoculars for kids and adults. You can rent field kits to play games on the nearby lawns, and you can also rent fishing poles for catch and release fishing. Again, this building isn't open right now, but it still serves giving us a beautiful view along the Harlem Meer as we take our walk today. Just outside of the Charles A. Dana Center, we do have some nice little potted plants, and you'll notice that it is a little gloomy because the other week when I was walking around, it was very overcast and it had just rained a little bit before that. I actually love though when it's overcast and cloudy because it adds more color to the park. And this rain was actually really beautiful because if we take a closer look, we can see some of those water droplets just glazing over the plants. These are begonias and these potted plants outside, and they look absolutely beautiful after they get a little wetness and mist on them. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the Harlem Meer because we didn't come here just to look at the plants. Before we do though, I do want to launch our first poll, and I want to get an idea if anybody's ever visited the Harlem Meer before. So I'm going to launch our first poll. Once you vote in that, that'll disappear. And once we're done, I'll share the results and we can see if anybody's visited this area before, or maybe this is a first time. As always, I like to put "I'm not sure" as one of the options because Central Park is 843 acres, 2.5 miles long. So it's kind of hard to know if you've explored every area. So I see we have most people voting. We're getting the last few results in, and I'm going to end this poll and we'll share the results and see. All right. So pretty cool. It looks like we have about a split. It looks like actually majority of people have not visited the Haarlemmeer before. So we're really happy to take you around the Haarlemmeer and let you explore it for your first time. There's of course a lot to see in this area, so we'll try to keep things moving. All right, so continuing around, let's talk really about why the Haarlemmeer is called the Haarlemmeer. So Harlem didn't get absorbed into New York City until about 1712. Before this area was very much rocky, kind of swampy land. This map might not show too much, but you can see all those lines and sort of these kind of lightly green colored areas where this black line's running through, where I'm going over with my mouse. This area that would become Central Park was pretty swampy, rocky, and a few open areas. What we largely saw existing here were actually some farmers, Dutch farmers. There was a lot of cattle herding from Dutch farmers as well as tobacco farms in these areas. Eventually, this rocky, swampy landscape would be absorbed into what would become Central Park. One of the reasons being it was so rocky and swampy, they couldn't do too much else with it. This swampy, marshy area actually got turned into the Haarlemmeer, which we're going to be exploring around today. And to pay tribute to the people that used to inhabit this area, we have Haarlemmeer, meer being a Dutch word for lake. So if you're exploring around the Haarlemmeer, you're exploring around the Haarlem Lake. Really cool little area that we're going to jump right into. Talk a little bit more about the history as we go, but let's get to present day, the beautiful sweeping views that we're going to see. One of my favorite parts about the Haarlemmeer is how much access it provides. We can get right up to the water in so many areas. And when we do walk up to the water, this is a common sight we might see, people fishing. There is catch and release fishing allowed in Central Park in all bodies of water except for the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir. Again, you typically can rent fishing poles out from the Dana Center, but unfortunately they're closed right now. But if you do have your own fishing pole and New York City fishing license, you can come stop in the park and go fishing. There's many different fish that you can see in the park. You can see bass of different size. You can actually see larger carp. You can see bluegill, a variety of sunfish. You may even see some larger ornamental koi fish. We're going to keep walking just around the border of the water, and we'll see what beautiful views or wildlife we can find. As we continue around, you'll notice there's so many different fishing areas or boat landings that just offer beautiful views, but none that give you the entirety of the mere. So you have to keep walking around it to really enjoy that beautiful view. As we continue around, there's a lot of beautiful shoreline plants that exist here. Some of my favorites are actually located just in this back layer over here. We look a little bit closer, we can see, looks like a corn dog, but it's actually a cattail. This is a native wild reed that can be found throughout New York, and it's one that you can see all along the Haarlemmeer area. If you kind of move it around and tuff it, you can see the spores or seeds start to actually coming out. This is a plant that actually grows from basically flaking away and the wind blowing it around. Wind dispersion is how this cattail will actually grow. And you can see many other different types of reed varieties around the Haarlemmeer. Another one that is just to the left of these cattails is the very large growing Phragmites. Phragmites are an invasively growing reed and very common. And you can see here, they get extremely tall. Some of the ones towards this back layer or right-hand side are about 10 to 12 feet high. But these will get trimmed back in a little bit. The Conservancy does a lot of work to maintain a healthy landscape and ecosystem, especially around water bodies, which are very, very important. So these will get trimmed back at one point or another. But at the moment, it offers a really cool view, just blocking out not only the whole mere, but a lot of those really tall buildings along Fifth Avenue. One thing we can look at real quick while we're here is what the Haarlemmeer used to look like. Haarlemmeer was not always as beautiful as it is today. This is actually a building, an old boathouse that unfortunately caught fire and was abandoned. That used to sit where today's Charles A. Discovery Center exists. So of course, the Conservancy had to do a lot of work to restore this area. We launched a restoration project between 1988 and 1993 that involved not only fixing up the shoreline, removing that concrete wall, but making a more natural shoreline. We actually had to dredge the water and remove a lot of not only garbage, but sediment to make sure it's a healthy ecosystem. Today, we have a much more naturalistic shoreline that allows us not only access, but peace of mind as we get beautiful views walking around. So let's go back to present day and continue around the very beautiful Haarlemmeer area. We're going to wrap around towards the Fifth Avenue side and kind of walk parallel to Fifth Avenue around the south end of the Harlem Meer. And as we walk down, again, more different boat landings, more different beautiful, expansive views that we have. We can see just off in the background that area where we started our tour, where we saw that gentleman fishing. And if we keep an eye in the water, you never know what you're gonna see. Like this American bullfrog. Pull up another little picture so we can see a top view of him. But that American bullfrog, I would estimate, is about the size of a softball. They can grow very, very large. They could almost get up to the size of your head. And they don't move around too much, so they can take a keen eye to spot. But again, if you keep your eye open, you never know what type of wildlife you're gonna see in Central Park. So we'll start walking down a little bit more. And as we walk down the path, one of my favorite things to do, especially along this kind of Fifth Avenue side of the Harlem Meer, is look at a lot of the beautiful native plants that are growing along the shoreline. We do focus today on putting as many native species in the park as possible. And some of those ones you're gonna see are jewelweed. Jewelweed is a really cool flower that has a couple different names. One of the names you may have heard these being referred to are called touch-me-nots. The reason they're referred to as touch-me-nots is because unlike the cattails, which spread their seeds through wind, these actually spread their seeds through a very light touch. These actually loosen their seeds inside, and the slightest touch, a raindrop, somebody tapping on it, will actually knock the seeds out and let that plant grow and propagate. Really cool little nickname and really cool little flower that you can see growing along the Harlem Meer. We continue around, there are plenty of other beautiful weeds to see here. This is giant ironweed. Giant ironweed offers a really cool purple type of flower that blooms between July and September. So we made it just in time to see this really beautiful purple flower peak. This is another native plant that a lot of people consider weeds and take out of areas, but they're really important to local wildlife. This is actually a really favorite photo of mine that I took on the walk. This actually shows pretty much all of the plants that we covered so far, with the exception of the begonias. But in the background, we can see some of those cattails. Right on the far right side, we can see some Phragmites. Here in the middle, we can see those jewelweed or touch-me-nots. And then over here, the giant ironweed. While we're here, actually, I want to launch our second poll. I love flowers and different wildlife. So I want to see if you have maybe a favorite flower or plant that we saw so far. We only saw a couple, and you'll notice I also put the, in parentheses, kind of a nickname of what they are, just because plants don't always stick the best for me, sometimes colors do. So we have the purple giant ironweeds, of course that orange yellow colored touch-me-not, the Phragmites are the really tall growing ones, cattails look like corn dogs, and then the begonias were those orange ones with the water droplets on them in the beginning of our walk. See just about everybody voting. We have about 230 people here today. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We love doing these walks and we love having you attend with us. So I'm going to end this poll in just a moment and we'll see if maybe anybody has a favorite flower around here. All right, so I'm going to share the results. And we're going to see that it looks like the giant ironweed, for good reason. That beautiful purple plant is certainly a favorite. I saw a lot of interest in the cattails at first, but it looks like it dropped down a little bit. And then the touch-me-nots certainly up there too. That's a really cool story with them, how they just release their seeds. All right. I see not too many people like the Phragmites. Yeah, they kind of block out the view a little bit. Right on. So we'll see another plant or two as we continue our walk along. But let's continue walking along this southeastern section of the Harlem Meer. As we walk down, we're going to see a few other residents of the Meer. This is a double-crested cormorant. Double-crested cormorants are one of the many migratory birds that stop through this area. And it's really cool little kind of a bird to see around. They actually are diving birds. So you might see ducks that dabble, looks like they're doing a handstand in the water, getting vegetation. Diving ducks, pretty easy to guess. They dive underwater for fish and other vegetation. These double-crested cormorants will swim around, dive underwater, and maybe be gone for a dozen seconds or so before popping back up in a completely different area of the Meer. But certainly a fun little bird to see around as we walk around the Meer today. And he is definitely enjoying a beautiful view over here, certainly a good spot and understandable why he's perched up over here. Enjoying not only that little sandy beach area, but also this beautiful view towards the Dana Center where we began our walk. So we'll continue down around the path and we're going to be right over here on this bottom right-hand side, coming around that south inlet of the Harlem Meer. As we walk around this way, hang a right, we're going to come up to yet another beautiful boat landing. There's plenty of areas to either go catch and release fishing or just enjoy the beautiful view. This spot in particular, located just north of the conservatory garden. But we're going to continue wrapping around the Mere and check out that southern section. So as we go around, we're going to hang a right and come on to more of a dirt, rocky road path. I always love going on these trails rather than walking on the concrete paths or sidewalks of the city. Helps us connect a little bit more with nature. We're going to go right under that willow tree and really enter this kind of naturalistic portal. And as we come around, you'll notice something that you can see all throughout Central Park. The path curves off and doesn't show us where it goes. We have to adventure around and we have to discover what's lying ahead. So as we walk along, we'll see other surprising little views, the Dana Center over there, as well as more vegetation popping up, which kind of cover up the path a little bit. And again, leave it up to our imagination. So as we continue walking around, we can see something else that you will certainly notice, especially in the northern end of Central Park, large rock outcroppings. These large rock outcroppings, primarily on the southern end of the Harlem Mere, are over 500 million years old. They're the bedrock of New York City, and they certainly add a lot of character to this area of Central Park. This is also one of the reasons we mentioned earlier why this became Central Park. So many of these rock outcroppings existed, it was really difficult for agriculture development of the area. So they just ended up putting it into what would become Central Park. But we certainly love these rocks today because they offer great views as well as cool, just natural examples of the geology of Manhattan and New York State. We'll continue walking around and see another rock face or two. But as we come around again, we see these more curving bends, and every way we look, we get a nice little view of that Victorian style Dana Center. As we walk around the bend, we'll see a few different other kinds of reeds and plants. One that we see over here, which is a really cool one during this time, is Joe Pye weed. Joe Pye weed, like P-Y-E, not like pizza pie, is a really cool other native reed or weed that can be found around the Harlem Mere. These actually start off a really, really deep kind of purple color, and eventually they're going to dry out. And when they do dry out, they're going to sort of flake out. And just like those cattails, those seeds will be blown away in the wind. These are really cool though, because these clusters are about the size of my head. So very, very large plants we have growing around here. And while I was taking this picture, I kind of felt like I was being watched. But don't worry, there's a happy ending to this seemingly scary story. What was watching me was actually some of the local wildlife. Actually, it's right in the middle of this picture. It might be a little hard to see, but if I zoom in, we can get a better look. What was watching me was an eastern chipmunk. Eastern chipmunks are one of our favorite rodents that can be found throughout Central Park, and of course, native to New York. They're very adorable, and they let off a little squeaking sound that a lot of people confuse with birds. But if you keep your eyes around, especially in the northern end of Central Park, you can see eastern chipmunks all over. So we'll leave him be, let him go back to catching some food and storing for the winter. And we'll walk around this bend. You can see we're coming right around that middle section of the southern area of the Harlem Mere. Have another stop or two before we end our walk. We'll keep walking around. And I love these willow trees that grow all around the Mere because they branch down towards the water. Willows will actually be very invasive in trying to get to the water. So it creates these tunnels as well as almost just creates little bridges of the trees. We'll walk right under this willow tree and bear to the left, and we're going to be coming out towards that western section of the Mere. We can actually see in this photo are two things. We can actually see this little island on the right, and there are a few different islands throughout the water bodies in Central Park. The purpose being so the birds, turtles, and other wildlife have an area to go where we can't get to, because everybody should be able to come to Central Park and enjoy a little bit of peace and quiet. Another thing that we can see just off in the background is that kind of blue-gray wall. That is the Lasker Pool and Rink. And we're not going to be stopping or really viewing the Lasker Pool and Rink today, but this area is actually undergoing a major restoration project, the largest capital project for the Conservancy, coming in at about $150 million. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be rebuilding the facility to better integrate into the landscape. We're going to offer new and enhanced outdoor activities, and we're going to increase access to communities in the north end of Central Park. There's a lot of information available on this, and if you check the chat box now, my colleagues Jose and Juan are going to be dropping in a link where you can learn more about this restoration project. But we're going to continue wrapping around the Mere. And as we come around just outside of Lasker, we're going to see another boat landing, and we see a bunch of Canada geese as well as mallards enjoying a little bath, it looks like, over here. And these mallards are very friendly, especially in the northern end. They let you come up real close. This one, let me take a little photo shoot. And you know when you have that itch that you just can't quite scratch? Well, that's what was going on over here. Luckily, this mallard let me come up and take a few glamour shots of her while she was cleaning up. But we see a lot of wildlife really coming close and interacting with you up here. Of course, you never want to feed the wildlife, but it's certainly fine to take photos of them up close and personal. So we'll let these geese and mallards go back to their bathing, and we'll continue walking around the beautiful area of the Mere. And I love this west side because we get a little bit more of an expansive view, probably one of the more open views we can really see of the Mere. And I love, again, these cloudy days where we get the reflection of the buildings. So we're going to keep walking around the path, coming up to just more beautiful views. And I love seeing on the northern end of the Mere these large rock outcroppings. It's always nice to also go up on top of those rock outcroppings and get a view, but I kind of personally like this view where we get a little bit of everything in there. We're going to keep walking around, and we're going to be coming up to really our end of the walk today. We do want to try to use the path as much as possible rather than taking some of these desire lines. So we're going to walk up around the path and hang a right, bringing us back to the Charles A. Dana Discovery Center. This is a great spot to, again, start and end your walk in, or really start or end your walk in Central Park. Again, when this building is open, you can get maps and insight into Central Park, but you can still get any of that available on our website, centralparknyc.org. So this is actually going to be bringing us to the end of our walk, but before we do, I do just want to launch one more poll. I want to see if you have a favorite landscape in Central Park. Of course, we like to cover a lot of different areas, and we'd like to hear what areas you like to cover. I certainly love walking around water bodies, and I would say woodlands are probably my favorite. But let's see if you maybe have a favorite area of the park. Put a couple different ones on there too, like playgrounds, because maybe you have kids, or maybe you're younger and like to come to the park and go to a playground. No matter how you like to enjoy Central Park, there are certainly plenty of different landscapes to really enjoy it with. So I'm going to end this poll in just a moment, get all those last results in, but this is going to be bringing us to the end of our walk today. I again want to thank everybody so much for joining us. We love doing these weekly walks, and we love having you in attendance. Of course, if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask, because I am going to be keeping this program going for a couple more minutes, so my colleagues Juan and Jose can answer any questions you have. But if you do want to continue staying connected with us here at the park, you can again tune into our weekly walks every Wednesday at 12:30, as well as our longer virtual programs that typically happen on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We do have a tree walk coming up soon with Ian, I believe tomorrow, as well as a few other Heart of the Park and Southern Welcome tours. Of course, there are other ways you can explore Central Park on your own as well. You can share your own stories of Central Park using the hashtag #MyCentralPark, or you can visit our website, centralparknyc.org, where you can find other virtual programs, you can find discovery activities for kids, self-guided tours, and you can find much, much more. We also have all of these weekly walks available on our YouTube channel. So feel free to join our YouTube channel and rewatch these walks if you want to relearn about areas of the park. I'm going to end this poll though and share our results, and we can see that water bodies are certainly a favorite of a lot of people, and for good reason, especially with the beauty of the Harlem Mere that we saw today. So I want to thank everybody so much again for joining us. From all of us here at the Conservancy, be safe and be well.